I've never actually watched a single episode of Sons of Anarchy.
Maybe you should have.
Hopping into the first of our double feature for the GTA 4 DLC, we have The Lost and Damned, released in February of 2009 to Xbox 360 owners, and then in April of 2010 for PC and PS3. A whole year and 2 months later. What happened here? Well, it looks like Microsoft was originally planning on keeping both this and The Ballad of Gay Tony as an exclusive for the 360, but plans ultimately ended up changing. The age when Microsoft actually cared about exclusives. How things have changed. The unfortunate timing of that joke honestly couldn't have been any better. Well, for one reason or another, The Lost and Damned was thankfully brought over to other platforms so everyone could eventually experience them. I think part of the apprehension was because Rockstar was unsure of how popular this was going to be, but I mean, come on, it's GTA. Of course people are going to have at least some level of interest. And well, hey, look at that. The game scored in the high 80s and low 90s on Metacritic. However, with that being said, I couldn't really find any sales number to really back up how popular this expansion actually was. The closest thing I could find is actually a statement from Rockstar in late 2009 saying that they overestimated how many people would actually purchase this DLC, since it seemed like the largest portion of people who did had already finished GTA 4 and wanted more story content. Interesting to think about, since you hear a ton of discourse today around people wishing that we got a single-player DLC for GTA 5, so I guess I kind of see why Rockstar might have taken the route that they did, but I digress. There's still a pretty decent reason for that fan outcry though. The Lost and the Damned is pretty damn good, if I do say so myself. Like and subscribe, please. I'm running out of jokes here. But seriously, I had a pretty good time with this DLC. This is a standalone expansion that provides a completely different perspective during the events from GTA 4 and adds a decent amount of new characters, activities, and missions to do. Like, it's not perfect, and in a couple of ways kind of highlights some of my least favorite things about GTA 4, but for the most part, it still adds a solid 10 or so hours of content that, if you like what you played in the base game, is definitely a worthy follow-up. We've got a lot to discuss today, so without further ado, this is my review for Grand Theft Auto 4: The Lost and Damned. Presentation-wise, there really isn't too much to go over when it comes to this expansion that separates itself from GTA 4. Like, I could go into detail about how the minimap has some grungy splotches now, or how the menu text is red instead of yellow, but come on, is that what you guys really want to talk about? No, instead, how about another round of me naming how kick-ass the soundtrack is? Yeah, if there's any new addition to the Lost and Damned's presentation, it's definitely in the music department, and we get some really solid selections here. We get some more hip-hop tracks from artists such as Busta Rhymes, Kanye West, T.I., and fucking DJ Khaled.
Oh, this cappuccino! It looked just like a cappuccino. I call it cappuccino!
The real additions were definitely towards the rock station since, well, you know, bikers. We got some classic rock picks from Deep Purple, Saxon, Bon Jovi, and Motley Crue, but I think the best additions were all the metal songs they added from bands such as Deicide, Cannibal Corpse, At the Gates, Entombed, Sepultura, Creator, really the who's who from the late 80s and early 90s death and thrash metal scenes, which fucking kick ass. Now when it comes to the story and characters, I can't say that they completely kick ass though. In this expansion, you play as Johnny Klebitz, the vice president of the Liberty City chapter of the Lost MC, a motorcycle club which we've seen a little bit from in the base game. As Johnny, you will essentially try to do what you can to keep your group together as you do various odd jobs around the city, including drug running, gang fighting, and even abduction of a character we're all very familiar with. It's a pretty decent setup, and if there's one thing I can say that The Lost and Damned does incredibly well, is it gets that biker energy down packed. From the dingy locations you hang around in, to the tough love and banter you share between fellow members, it really has a vibe all of its own. In a way, it kind of reminds me a bit of a much more stripped down and shortened version of Red Dead Redemption 2, seeing as how it's a gang of outlaws with a leader who may or may not be all there depending on the day. But when I say stripped down and shortened, that also comes with the fact that everything here feels really rushed and underbaked within the main story, and just as I'm getting to know some of these characters, they're either killed off or their missions are complete, and then the next thing you know, the expansion is already finished. The plot points of getting acquainted with your biker gang, to having your leader captured, to you being suspected for his incarceration, to you finding out the leader was a rat this whole time, and you enacting your revenge, it all feels like events that should have happened over the course of a 20-hour adventure rather than 6. Which, I get. It's an episodic expansion. I'm not really expecting the world here. But I think for the story that they wanted to tell here, there just needed to be a bit more time to breathe, you know? There are a ton of different messages in the subtext to really explore either this time around from what I could see. No, this story really serves as a means to show that Liberty City has a lot going on outside of what we saw in GTA 4. There still are some pretty fun interactions, such as kidnapping Roman, or the weird relationship with Ashley, or there's this moment where you get to see a holy shit, that's a fucking penis. I legitimately almost lost it when I saw this. Like, I don't remember a game earlier than this having a dick straight on display for everybody to see, except for maybe like those weird Atari porn games, I guess. Someone should really make a video essay about the history of cocks in video games. No, not me, no. Outside of that, it's telling that some of the strongest points in the narrative are when you interact with characters such as Nico, Roman, or Ray, so it's kind of interesting to get another perspective on some of the incidents that happened in the base game that we didn't immediately see, which I absolutely love the fact that we get this interwoven story here, since it makes Liberty City seem like an even more bustling place that has a lot more going on rather than whatever Nico was currently doing. I like when games do things like this, and even though that might mean retreading a few set pieces here and there, I'm okay with that if it means having a strong sense of cohesion, which in this case, it definitely does. So overall, when it comes to the story and presentation, I think it's mostly fine. Presentation is more or less the same, and the story is pretty decent, has some funny moments, does some pretty cool things with some overlapping events in the main game, but mostly comes up a little bit short of how fantastic the story was in the base game. Not a lot to talk about here, but thankfully, things get a little bit more spicy when it comes to the gameplay, which, yeah, let's get into that real quick. So most of the gameplay will hinge on your enjoyment of GTA 4. If you like the new stuff that GTA 4 brought to the table, I think you're really going to enjoy many of the new things in The Lost and Damned. And if you didn't enjoy GTA 4, why are you here? Being the biker DLC for GTA 4, you can probably expect a lot of motorcycles to be present, which they are. Oh boy, they definitely are. Yeah, so while the main game had motorcycles be mostly optional, in this expansion, there are several points that will require the player to be on a bike in order to progress with certain missions. And as I said in my last video, I think the motorcycle controls honestly suck. Taking sharp turns is a crapshoot whether you successfully make the maneuver or straight up crash, and whenever you need to drive a bike off the road, it's just the absolute worst. And considering driving is like what you're doing for 2/3 of your playthrough or so, you can imagine that this can be a bit aggravating. That's not to say there aren't things that make the bikes at least a little bit better. They did add a ton of new bikes to be able to drive, and even a couple of other vehicles too. They also have a new ally that will deliver bikes to your destination whenever you give them a call. There are actually a couple of new allies this go around that do some new stuff, such as being able to call it a gun truck for some exclusive weapons such as grenade launchers, a fully auto pistol, and an assault shotgun, as well as being able to call in additional NPCs for backup. Best part about all this, you don't need to get their affinity levels up to be able to use these abilities. Thank God. Actually, what's kind of cool with these NPCs is that you can actually have them gain experience as you take them out on missions. Now, for the most part, this is kind of a non-factor since if an NPC dies on a mission, they get replaced with a new one and their experience starts at 0. But there are a few plot-relevant members that will eventually get new weapons as you use them, which is kind of neat. And since they don't die, it's usually worth calling them anyway. Of course, you can also see some of these NPCs do some of the new activities, such as arm wrestling, air hockey, and this high-low card game. And these are all decently fun distractions in their own right. But I still would say they're kind of on the janky side. The high-low card game is easily the best out of the three. The dealer flips a card, you just gotta guess higher or lower. Pretty simple, but it's also kind of funny to watch the computer get completely dicked over. Get fucked, loser. Then there's the arm wrestling, which kind of gives me PTSD flashbacks to ruining my controllers by playing some of the minigames in the earlier Mario Party games, so I only played this once. And then there's air hockey, and it's probably the least exciting thing I've ever seen. I played one game and no one could get a single goal to save their life, and then Clay just sort of had a stroke and couldn't figure out how to get his puck unstuck. Pity. But the majority of the content you're going to get in this expansion comes with all the new missions, which, I have to say, is about on the same level of quality as what we experienced in the base game. Which, keep in mind, definitely isn't a bad thing because, like I said in my GTA 4 video, For the most part, I thought the missions were fine, if a bit on the repetitive side. There are at least a couple things to consider that change things up slightly this time around, such as the missions where you are firing at the police on the back of a motorcycle, which is kind of unique, and there's some checkpoints to make some of the longer missions a little bit less of a hassle if you end up failing them. Overall, not bad, especially if you really like the missions in the main game. Probably the biggest additions in this expansion actually have to do with the side content now, which are divided up into street races and gang war minigames. These are both pretty simple. For the street races, you'll basically just have to do a few laps against some other bikers, all while beating each other with bats. Okay, wait, what the fuck? And if you think the controls were tough before, now try and have someone bop you every couple of seconds. It's something, that's for sure. Though if you do manage to get to the front, the race is pretty much won for you at that point, so there's that. And then there's the gang warfare, essentially a slightly less mechanically interesting version of the ones from San Andreas that sees players drive to a location, kill the enemies there, and that's about it. I didn't really bother doing much of these. They're a fun distraction, but outside of that and getting some extra cash, there really isn't any great reward for completing these. But they do add a solid couple of hours to your game time and are fun enough that I think you can get some enjoyment with them. Well, that was pretty quick, so what did I overall think of The Lost and Damned? I have to say, I had a pretty fun time with this, even if I did think it was overall a little bit of a step down from GTA 4's main game. I think the content it adds is a fun distraction, and nothing here is what I would consider a must-play, but it was still good nevertheless. I thought the story did a great job of expanding the world of Liberty City, the music selection kicked ass, and the new gameplay additions were welcomed and actually pretty interesting. I think your overall enjoyment is going to depend on how much you enjoyed the base game. If you loved it, then I think The Lost and Damned is a great way to get some extra mileage for your playthrough. But if you didn't really care for GTA 4, then I honestly think you might be better off skipping this one, since it doesn't really do much radically different from the main game, and I don't think it's going to change your mind here. It's pretty safe to assume that you probably already own this if you bought GTA 4 in the last decade or so, since this and the next expansion are bundled in with most versions of the game now. So it definitely doesn't hurt to give this a playthrough if you're at all curious. That's all the time I have for you guys today. Thank you for watching. What was your favorite memory of Grand Theft Auto 4, The Lost and Damned? Please be sure to leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. And hey, if you enjoyed today's video, maybe consider giving a like and subscribing. Thank you guys again. I'll catch you in the next video.